The White House and congressional Republicans say they're looking to sharply cut taxes.
The president's address last night did not include many details, but he did talk about some of what he'd like to do.
Right now, American companies are taxed at one of the highest rates anywhere in the world. My economic team is developing historic tax reform that will reduce the tax rate on our companies so they can compete and thrive anywhere and with anyone. It will be a big, big cut. At the same time, we will provide massive tax relief for the middle class. We must create a level playing field for American companies and our workers.
Joining us now is Zachary Karabell, contributing editor for Politico and head of global strategies at InvestNet. Zachary, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the president's remarks last night. Is America losing money on imports from foreign countries?
You know, if there were a simple answer to that question, I'd be in politics. Look, there are some imports that we're losing money on, but the reality is a lot of these things are resourced, meaning they're part of a supply chain. They go into American products that are manufactured here, even though they're imported from somewhere else. The desire to reduce this all to a really simple optic, like we're losing, I think he said $800 million in a trade deficit, makes it seem as if every dollar that we spend on imports just kind of leaves the country. And, you know, the reality is it doesn't quite work that way.
What information and details are you looking for from this administration to see what's really going to happen? Because so far we hear about a large budget plan that increases defense spending. We're not touching entitlement programs, right. And he said there in his joint address that he will reduce taxes on the middle class.
So first of all, you'd have to look, you would have to look for some actual specifics, and there have been no specifics forthcoming. And that's not a criticism, meaning it's just a fact. There have not been a budget that's been proposed. Typically, an administration proposes a very detailed line item budget to Congress. Presumably, that will come out of the White House and the Office of Management budget at some point in the coming months. But as of now, these are much more like sketches on the back of a napkin than they are really concrete plans. $1 trillion in infrastructure spending, which is something probably a lot of Democrats could support. What does that mean? Does that mean creating tax breaks so the companies spend that money? Is it Congress spending that money? There is a miasma of uncertainty around what exactly is being proposed and how.
Well, before last night's speech, the president said he hasn't been great about being a messenger. You know, what can he do going forward to sell an American corporate tax break to the American people?
So corporate tax cuts have been on the table for more than a decade. In fact, the Obama administration also proposed cutting the corporate tax rate. The problem is, on the face of it, that looks like a hard political sell. You know, you're trying to say to your constituents, we're going to cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to X, whatever X is, 20%, 25%. And meanwhile, someone's going, great, this billion-dollar corporation's getting a tax cut, and I'm earning $40,000 a year and getting nothing. The point of a corporate tax rate is very few companies pay that rate. So 35% of nothing is nothing. And if most companies are not paying 35%, the rate might be that, but between all these tax breaks and keeping money offshore, most companies are paying, some people say 15%, some people say 20%. So you lower the tax rate in order to collect more money, the real rate that's increased. But again, that's a very hard, or at least it has until now, been a very hard sell because of the optics.
And it sounds as if there is a difference between what is being sold, what things are being branded as, and what the reality is in a very complicated, intertwined economy. For example, there's been a positive attitude from Wall Street, and the Dow's been up, and there's been enthusiasm. President Trump is taking credit for that.
Yes.
Is this based on solid fundamentals in the economy, or is it because everyone is so excited about a pro-business president?
So again, I mean, as we speak, right, the Dow and the S&P 500 are having their best day of the year and in quite a long time. The great thing about all this is we never get to replay the historical tape and try to figure out which variable is the most important. So you don't get to like wind back and say, gee, if Hillary had been elected, would the Dow have been up? If, you know, Evan, whatever from Ohio, we only get the history that we have. And it's very tempting to take correlation, i.e. we know markets have gone up, we know Trump's been elected, and go, well, they've gone up because Trump's been elected. Maybe. But I could, and many people have, you can make a pretty solid case for stocks in general doing decently because the economy is growing couple percent. There's very low inflation. People are feeling better, right? There's good consumer confidence. So really untying what's from what. Obviously, the most honest thing would be at the point at which stocks go down, you would think then you have to take responsibility for that too. If they're going up because of what you're doing, they're going down because of what you're doing.
But Zachary, we haven't seen an actual plan. We haven't seen numbers. So when do you expect the president to outline a plan, and does he have to
look, at some point the White House has to outline something, right? It cannot simply exist in this realm of speeches and ideas. It will be held to account for what it proposes. As we all know, one of the challenges of the current White House is if you're incredibly understaffed in the positions where people actually have to do the writing. You know, the president doesn't sit down and write a line item budget for the Pentagon or for the Department of Health and Human Services. Somebody has to really go in and do this. And when you're not fully staffed to do it, it's really, really challenging for that to happen.
Could it have a negative impact on the markets if he doesn't release a plan soon? Or is that just too hard to tell?
I'm personally more skeptical that the markets are really going up because of Trump. There's a nice ballast because people are expecting lots of good things, infrastructure spending, some deregulation, all of which could unlock some capital. But I think there are reasons totally separate for this. There are very specific areas of the market that have gone up a lot in anticipation of infrastructure spending. And if that doesn't happen at all, some of those companies that have gone up because they think there's going to be all this money might pull back. But, you know, it would have to be like a really clear moment, like we have no plan, and it's not going to happen that way. It's just going to.
And just quickly in our last few seconds, we are 9 years on from the Great Recession.
Yep.
You know, there's been growth since then, and markets are cyclical. Would you expect within this next year some kind of market?
Look, I mean, I make a point of having an honest, no one knows the future response to these questions. And while everybody wants to know are stocks going to go up, anybody who tells you that they know stocks are going to go up or go down doesn't know any more than the rest of us because no one has that crystal ball. We're 9 years from the financial crisis. At some point, we're enough years from the financial crisis that we're in whatever reality we're in. You know, we're 75 years away from World War II. I don't think we talk about that as a reference point anymore. So at some point, we're in the world that we're in. All I know is that companies continue to thrive. Markets are doing okay, but they're not doing nearly as well as people think. And bond yields are rising because the Fed's going to raise rates.
Very soon. Well, thanks for walking us through some of the complicated pieces of this.
Zachary Karabell.
Thank you.
Thank you.